the Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa. Translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit text by Pratap Chandra Roy C.I.E. This free ebook has been downloaded from holybooks.com. Adi Parva, Section 24, Astika Parva continued. Soti said, then hearing of and beholding his own body, that bird of beautiful feathers diminished its size. And Garuda said, let no creature be afraid, as ye are in affright at the sight of my terrible form, I shall diminish my energy. Soti continued, then that bird capable of going everywhere at will, that ranger of the skies capable of calling to his aid any measure of energy, bearing Aruna on his back, wended from his father's home and arrived at his mother's side on the other shore of the great ocean. And he placed Aruna of great splendor in the eastern regions, just at a time when Surya had resolved to burn the worlds with his fierce rays. Soinka said, why did the reverend Surya resolve at that time to burn the worlds? What wrong was done to him by the gods that provoked his ire? Soti said, O sinless one, when Rahu was drinking nectar among the gods at the time of churning of the ocean, he was pointed out to the gods by Surya and Soma, and from that time he conceived an enmity towards those deities. And upon this Rahu sought to devour his af victor, Surya, became wroth, and thought, oh, this enmity of Rahu towards me hath sprung from my desire of benefiting the gods. And this dire consequence I alone have to sustain. Indeed, at this pass help I obtain not. And before the very eyes of the denizens of heaven I am going to be devoured, and they brook it quietly. Therefore, for the destruction of the worlds must I strive. And with this resolution he went to the mountains of the west. And from that place he began to scatter his heat around for the destruction of the world. And then the great Re-and-Hit, approaching the gods, spake unto them, Lo, in the middle of the night springeth a great heat, striking terror into every heart, and destructive of the three worlds. Then the gods, accompanied by the rishis, wended to the grandsire, and said unto him, Oh, what is this great heat today that causeth us such panic? Surya hath not yet risen, still the destruction of the world is obvious one, O Lord, what shall it be when he doth rise? The grandsire replied, Indeed, Surya is prepared to rise today for the destruction of the world. As soon as he will appear he will burn everything into a heap of ashes. By me, however, hath the remedy been provided beforehand. The intelligent son of Kasyapa is known to all by the name of Aruna. He is huge of body and of great splendor. He shall stay in front of Surya, doing the duty of his charioteer and taking away all the energy of the former. And this will ensure the welfare of the worlds, of the rishis, and of the dwellers in heaven. Soti continued, Aruna, at the behest of the grandsire, did all that he was ordered to do. And Surya rose welled by Aruna's person. I have told thee now why Surya was in wrath, and how Aruna, the brother of Garuda, was appointed as his charioteer. Hear next of that other question asked by thee a little while ago. And so ends the 24th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, Section 25, Astika Parva continued. Soti said, then that bird of great strength and energy and capable of going at will to every place repaired to his mother's side on the other shore of the great ocean. Thither lived Vinta in affliction, defeated in wager and put into a state of slavery. Once Kadru, calling Vinta, who had prostrated herself before the former, addressed her these words in the presence of her son, O gentle Vinta, there is in the midst of the ocean, in a remote quarter, a delightful and fair region inhabited by the Nagas. Bear me thither one. At this that mother of the bird of fair feathers bore, on her shoulders, the mother of the snakes. And Garuda also, directed by his mother's words, carried, on his back, the snakes. And that ranger of the skies born of winter began to ascend towards the sun. And thereupon the snakes, scorched by the rays of the sun, swooned away. And Kadru, seeing her sons in that state, prayed to Indra, saying, One bow to thee, thou lord of all the deities. I bow to thee, thou slayer of Vetra. I bow to thee, thou slayer of Namuchi. O thou of 1,000 eyes, consort of Sachi. By thy showers, be thou the protector of the snakes scorched by the sun. O thou best of the deities, thou art our great protector. O Purandara, thou art able to grant rain in torrents. Thou art Vayu, the air, the clouds, fire, and the lightning of the skies. Thou art the propeller of the clouds, and hast been called the great cloud, I, that which will darken the universe at the end of Yuga. Thou art the fierce and incomparable thunder, and the roaring clouds. Thou art the creator of the worlds and their destroyer. Thou art unconquered. Thou art the light of all creatures, Aditya, Vibhavasu, and the wonderful elements. Thou art the ruler of all the deities. Thou art Vishnu. Thou hast 1,000 eyes. Thou art a god, and the final resource. Thou art, O deity, all Amrita, and the most adored Soma one. Thou art the moment, the lunar day, the Bala, minute. Thou art the Kshana, 4 minutes. Thou art the lighted fortnight, and also the dark fortnight. Thou art Kala, thou Kashta, and thou Triti. One. Thou art the year, the seasons, the months, the nights, and the days. Thou art the fair earth with her mountains and forests. Thou art also the firmament resplendent with the sun. Thou art the great ocean with heaving billows and abounding with whales, swallowers of whales, and makras, and various fishes. One. Thou art of great renown, always adored by the wise and by the great bishis with minds wrapped in contemplation. Thou drinkest, for the good of all creatures, the soma juice in sacrifices and the clarified butter offered with sacred invocation. Thou art always worshipped at sacrifices by Brahmanas moved by desire of fruit. O thou of incomparable mass of strength, thou art said in the Vedas and Vedangas. It is for that reason that learned Brahmanas bent upon performing sacrifices, study the Vedas with every care. And so ends the 25th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, section 26, Astika Parva continued. Soti said, and then Indra, the king of gods, having the best of horses for his bearer, thus adored by Kadru, covered the entire firmament with masses of blue clouds, and he commanded the clouds, saying, Pour, ye, your vivifying and blessed drops. And those clouds, luminous with lightning, and incessantly roaring against each other in the welkin, poured abundant water. And the sky, in consequence of those wonderful and terrible roaring clouds that were incessantly begetting vast quantities of water, looked as if the end of Yuga had come. And in consequence of the myriads of waves caused in the falling torrents, the deep roar of the clouds, the flashes of lightning, the violence of the wind, and the general agitation, the sky looked as if dancing in madness. The sky became overcast, and the rays of the sun and the moon totally disappeared in consequence of that incessant downpour. And upon Indra's causing that downpour, the Nagas became exceedingly delighted. And the earth was filled with water all around. And the cool, clear water reached even the nether regions. And there were countless watery waves all over the earth. And the snakes with their mother reached, in safety, the island called Ramanyaka, and so ends the 26th section in the Astika Parva of the Adiparva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adiparva, section 27, Astika Parva continued, Soti said, and then the Nagas wetted with that shower, became exceedingly glad. And borne by that bird of fair feathers, they soon arrived at the island. That island had been fixed by the creator of universe as the abode of the Makras. There they saw the terrible Laban Samudra, ocean of salt. On arriving there with Garuda, they saw there a beautiful forest washed by the waters of the sea and resounding with the music of winged choirs. And there were clusters of trees all around laden with various fruits and flowers. And there were also fair mansions all around, and many tanks abounding with lotuses. And it was also adorned with many fair lakes of pure water. And it was refreshed with pure incense-breathing breezes. And it was adorned with many a tree that grew only on the hills of Malaya, and seemed by bare tallness to reach the very heavens. And there were also various other trees whose flowers were scattered all around by the breeze. And that forest was charming and dear to the Gandharvas and always gave them pleasure. And it was full of bees maddened with the honey they sucked. And the sight of all this was exceedingly delightful. And in consequence of many things there, capable of charming everybody, that forest was fair, delightful, and holy. And, echoing with the notes of various birds, it delighted greatly the sons of Kadru. And the snakes, after arriving at that forest, began to enjoy themselves. And they commanded the Lord of Birds, viz. Garuda, of great energy, saying, Convey us to some other fair island with pure water. Thou ranger of the skies, thou must have seen many fair regions while coursing through the air. Garuda, after reflecting for a few moments, asked his mother Vinta, saying, Why, mother, have I to do the bidding of the snakes? Vinta thus questioned by him spake unto that ranger of the skies, Visti her son, invested with every virtue, of great energy, and great strength as follows. Vinta said, O thou best of birds, I have become, from misfortune, the slave of my co-wife. The snakes, by an act of deception, caused me to lose my bet and have made me so. When his mother had told him the reason, that ranger of the skies, dejected with grief, addressed the snakes, saying, Tell me, ye snakes, by bringing what thing, gaining a knowledge of what thing, or doing what act of prowess, we may be freed from this state of bondage to you. Soti continued, the snakes, hearing him, said, Bring thou Amrita by force. Then, O bird, shall you be freed from bondage. And so ends the 27th section in the Astika Parva of the Adiparva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adiparva, section 28, Astika Parva continued, Soti said, Garuda, thus addressed by the snakes, then said unto his mother, I shall go to bring Amrita. I desired to eat something in the way. Direct me to it. Vinta replied, In a remote region in the midst of the ocean, the Nishdas have their fair home. Having eaten the thousands of Nishdas that live there, bring thou Amrita. But let not thy heart be ever set on taking the life of a Brahmana. Of all creatures a Brahmana must not be slain. He is, indeed, like fire. A Brahmana, when angry, becomes like fire or the sun, like poison or an edged weapon. A Brahmana, it has been said, is the master of all creatures. For these and other reasons, a Brahmana is the adored of the virtuous. O child, he is never to be slain by thee even in anger. Hostility with therefore, would not be proper under any circumstances. O sinless one, neither Agni nor Surya truly can consume so much as does the Brahmana of rigid vows, when angry. By these various indications must thou know a good Brahmana. Indeed, a Brahmana is the firstborn of all creatures, the foremost of the four orders, the father and the master of all. Garuda then asked, O mother, of what form is a Brahmana, of what behavior, and of what prowess? Doth he shine like fire, or is he of tranquil mien? And, O mother, it behoveth thee to tell my inquiring self, those auspicious signs by which I may recognize a Brahmana. Vinta replied, saying, O child, him shouldst thou know as the best amongst Brahmanas, who having entered thy throat would torture thee as a 6sh hook or burn thee as blazing charcoal. A Brahmana must never be slain by thee even in anger. And Vinta, out of affection for her son, again told him these words, him shouldst thou know as a good Brahmana who would not be digested in thy stomach. Although she knew the incomparable strength of her son, yet she blessed him heartily, for, deceived by the snakes, she was very much afflicted by woe. And she said, let Marut, the god of the winds, protect thy wings, and Surya and Soma thy vertebral regions, let Agni protect thy head, and the Vasis thy whole body. I also, O child, engaged in beneficial ceremonies, shall sit here for your welfare. Go then, O child, in safety to accomplish thy purpose. Soti continued, then Garuda, having heard the words of his mother, stretched his wings and ascended the skies. And endued with great strength, he soon fell upon the Nishdas, hungry and like another yam. And bent upon slaying the Nishdas, he raised a great quantity of dust that overspread the firmament, and sucking up water from amid the ocean, shook the trees growing on the adjacent mountains. And then that lord of birds obstructed the principal thoroughfares of the town of the Nishdas by his mouth, increasing its cleft at will. And the Nishdas began to fly in great haste in the direction of the open mouth of the great serpent-eater. And as birds in great affliction ascend by thousands into the skies when the trees in a forest are shaken by the winds, so those Nishdas blinded by the dust raised by the storm entered the wide-extending cleft of Garuda's mouth open to receive them. And then the hungry lord of all ranges of the skies, that oppressor of enemies, endued with great strength, and moving with greatest celerity to achieve his end, closed his mouth, killing innumerable Nishdas following the occupation of fishermen. So ends the 28th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, section 29, Astika Parva continued. Soti continued, a certain Brahmana with his wife had entered the throat of that ranger of the skies. The former began to burn the bird's throat like a piece of flaming charcoal. Him Garuda addressed, saying, O best of Brahmanas, come out soon from my mouth which I open for thee. A Brahmana must never be slain by me, although he may be always engaged in sinful practices. Unto Garuda, who had thus addressed him, that Brahmana said, O, let this woman of the Nishda caste, who is my wife, also come out with me. And Garuda said, taking the woman also of the Nishda caste with thee, come out soon. Save thyself without delay, since thou hast not yet been digested by the heat of my stomach. Soti continued, and then that Brahmana, accompanied by his wife of the Nishda caste, came out, and eulogizing Garuda wended whithersoever way he liked. And when that Brahmana had come out with his wife, that lord of birds, fleet as the mind, stretching his wings ascended the skies. He then saw his father, and hailed by him, Garuda of incomparable prowess made proper answers. And the great Rishi, Kasyapa, then asked him, O child, is it well with thee? Dost thou get sufficient food every day? Is there food in plenty for thee in the world of men? Garuda replied, My mother is ever well. And so is my brother, and so am I. But, father, I do not always obtain plenty of food, for which my peace is incomplete. I am sent by the snakes to fetch the excellent Amrita. Indeed, I shall fetch it today for emancipating my mother from her bondage. My mother commanded me, saying, Eat thou the nishdas. I have eaten them by thousands, but my hunger is not appeased. Therefore, O worshipful one, point out to me some other food, by eating which, O master, I may be strong enough to bring away Amrita by force. Thou shouldst indicate some food wherewith I may appease my hunger and thirst. Kasyapa replied, This lake thou sayest is sacred. It hath been heard, of even in the heavens there is an elephant, with face downwards, who continually draggeth a tortoise his elder brother. I shall speak to you in detail of their hostility in former life. Hearing from me the fact why they are here. There was of old a great rishi of the name of Vibhatvasu. He was exceedingly wrathful. He had a younger brother of the name of Supratika. The latter was averse to keep his wealth joint with his brothers. And Supratika would always speak of partition. After a certain time his brother Vibhavasu told Supratika, It is from great foolishness that persons blinded by love of wealth always desire to make a partition of their patrimony. After effecting a partition they fight with each other, deluded by wealth. Then again, enemies in the guise of friends cause estrangements between ignorant and selfish men after they become separated in wealth, and pointing out faults confirm their quarrels, so that the latter soon fall one by one. Absolute ruin very soon overtakes the separated. For these reasons the wise never speak approvingly of partition amongst brothers who, when divided, do not regard the most authoritative sastras and live always in fear of each other. But as thou, Supratika, without regarding my advice impelled by desire of separation, always wishest to make an arrangement about your property, thou shalt become an elephant. Supratika, thus cursed, then spake unto Vibhava, Thou also shalt become a tortoise moving in the midst of the waters. And thus on account of wealth those two fools, Supratika and Vibhavasu, from each other's curse, have become an elephant and a tortoise. Owing to their wrath, they have both become inferior animals. And they are engaged in hostilities with each other, proud of their excessive strength and the weight of their bodies. And in this lake those two beings of huge bodies are engaged in acts according to their former hostility. Look here, one amongst them, the handsome elephant of huge body, is even now approaching. Hearing his roar, the tortoise also of huge body, living within the waters, cometh out, agitating the lake violently. And seeing him, the elephant, curling his trunk, rusheth into the water, and endued with great energy, with motion of his tusks and forepart of his trunk and tail and feet, be agitates the water of the lake abounding with fishes. And the tortoise also of great strength, with upraised head, cometh forward for an encounter. And the elephant is 6 yojanas in height and twice that measure in circumference. And the height of the tortoise also is 3 yojanas and his circumference 10. Eat thou up both of them that are madly engaged in the encounter and bent upon slaying each other, and then accomplish the task that thou desirest. Eating that fierce elephant which looketh like a huge mountain and resembleth a mass of dark clouds, bring thou Amrita. Soti continued. Having said so unto Garuda, he, Kasyapa, blessed him, saying, Blessed be thou when thou art in combat with the gods. Let water pitchers filled to the brim, Brahmanas, kin, and other auspicious objects, bless thee, thou oviparous one. And, O thou of great strength, when thou art engaged with the gods in combat, let the Rufus, the Yojus, the Samas, the sacred sacrificial butter, all the mysteries, Upanishads, constitute thy strength. Garuda, thus addressed by his father, wended to the side of that lake. He saw that expanse of clear water with birds of various kinds all around. And remembering the words of his father, that ranger of the skies possessed of great swiftness of motion, seized the elephant and the tortoise, one in each claw. And that bird then soared high into the air. And he came upon a sacred place called Alamban and saw many divine trees. And struck by the wind raised by his wings, those trees began to shake with fear. And those divine trees having golden boughs feared that they would break. And the ranger of the skies, seeing that those trees capable of granting every wish were quaking with fear, went to other trees of incomparable appearance. And those gigantic trees were adorned with fruits of gold and silver and branches of precious gems. And they were washed with the water of the sea. And there was a large banyan among them, which had grown into gigantic proportions, that spoke unto that lord of birds, coursing towards it with the fleetness of the mind, Sit thou on this large branch of mine extending 100 yojanas, and eat the elephant and the tortoise. When that best of birds, of great swiftness and of body resembling a mountain, quickly alighted upon a bough of that banyan tree, the resort of thousands of winged creatures, and that bough also full of leaves shook and broke down. So ends the 29th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, Section 30, Astika Parva continued. Soti said, at the very touch by Garuda of great might with his feet, the branch of the tree broke as it was caught by Garuda. Casting his eyes around in wonder, he saw Valkylya rishis hanging from with heads downwards and engaged in ascetic penances. Reflecting that, if that bough fell down, the rishis would be slain, the mighty one held the elephant and the tortoise still more firmly with his claws. And from fear of slaying the rishis and desire of saving them, held that bough in his beaks, and rose on his wings. The great rishis were struck with wonder at the sight of that act of his which was beyond even the power of the gods, and gave that mighty bird a name. And they said, as this ranger of the skies rises on its wings bearing a heavy burden, let this foremost of birds having snakes for his food be called Garuda, bearer of heavy weight. And shaking the mountains by his wings, Garuda leisurely coursed through the skies. And as he soared with the elephant and the tortoise in his claws, he beheld various regions underneath. Desiring as he did to save the Valkyrs, he saw not a spot whereon to sit. At last he went to that foremost of mountains called Gandhamdana. There he saw his father Kasyapa engaged in ascetic devotions. Kasyapa also saw his son, that ranger of the skies, of divine form, possessed of great splendor, and energy and strength, and endued with speed of the wind or the mind, huge as a mountain peak, a ready smiter like the curse of a Brahmana, inconceivable, indescribable, frightful to all creatures, possessed of great prowess, terrible, of the splendor of Agni himself, and incapable of being overcome by the deities, Danvas, and invincible Rakshasas, capable of splitting mountain summits and sucking the ocean itself and destroying the three worlds, fierce, and looking like Yam himself, the illustrious Kasyapa. seeing him approach and knowing also his motive, spoke unto him these words. Kasyapa said, O child, do not commit a rash act, for then thou wouldst have to suffer pain. The Valkyrs, supporting themselves by drinking the rays of the sun, might, if angry, blast thee. Soti continued, Kasyapa then propitiated, for the sake of his son, the Valhyas of exceeding good fortune and whose sins had been destroyed by ascetic penances. And Kasyapa said, Ye whose wealth is asceticism, the essay of Garuda is for the good of all creatures. The task is great that he is striving to accomplish. It behoveth you to accord him your permission. Soti continued, those ascetics thus addressed by the illustrious Kasyapa, abandoned that vow and went to the sacred mountain of Himamvat for purposes of ascetic penances. After those rishis had gone away, the son of Vinta, with voice obstructed by the bow in his beaks, asked his father Kasyapa saying, O illustrious one, where shall I throw this arm of the tree? O illustrious one, indicate to me some region without human beings. Then Kasyapa spoke of a mountain without human beings, with caves and dales always covered with snow and incapable of approach by ordinary creatures even in thought. And the great bird bearing that branch, that elephant, and that tortoise, proceeded with great speed towards that mountain. The great arm of the tree with which that bird of huge body flew away could not be girt round with a cord made of 100 cow hides. Garuda, the lord of birds, then flew away for 100,000 of yojanas within the shortest time. And going according to the directions of his father to that mountain almost in a moment, that ranger of the skies let fall the gigantic bow. And it fell with a great noise. And that prince of mountains shook, struck with the storm raised by Garuda's wings. And the trees thereon dropped showers of flowers. And the peaks decked with gems and gold adorning that great mountain itself, were loosened and fell down on all sides. And the falling bough struck down numerous trees which, with golden flowers amid dark foliage, shone there like clouds charged with lightning. And those trees, bright as gold, falling down upon the ground and, dyed with mountain metals, shone as if they were bathed in the rays of the sun. Then that best of birds, Garuda, perching on the summit of that mountain, ate both the elephant and the tortoise, rose on his wings with great speed from the top of mountain summit. And various omens began to appear among the gods foreboding fear. Indra's favorite thunderbolt blazed up in a fright. Meteors with flames and smoke, loosened from the Vulcan, shot down during the day. And the weapons of the Vasis, the Rudras, the Adityas, the Sadhyas, the Maruts, and other gods, began to spend their force against one another. Such thing had never happened even during the war between the gods and the Asuras. And the winds blew accompanied with thunder, and meteors fell by thousands. And the sky, though cloudless, roared tremendously. And even he who was the god of gods shed showers of blood. And the flowery garlands on the necks of the gods faded and their prowess suffered diminution. And terrible masses of clouds dropped thick showers of blood. And the dust raised by the winds darkened the splendor of the very coronets of the gods. And he of 1,000 sacrifices, Indra, with the other gods, perplexed with fear at the sight of those dark forebodings, spoke unto Vrihaspati thus, Why, O worshipful one, have these natural disturbances suddenly arisen? No foe do I behold who would oppress us in war. Vrihaspati answered, O chief of the gods, O thou of 1,000 sacrifices, it is from thy fault and carelessness, and owing also to the ascetic penance of the high-soiled great race, Tus, the Valkylias, that the son of Kasyapa and Vinta, a ranger of the skies endued with great strength and possessing the capacity of assuming at will any form, is approaching to take away the Soma. And that bird, foremost among all endued with great strength, is able to rob you of the Soma. Everything is possible, with him, the unachievable he can achieve. Soti continued, Indra, having heard these words, then spoke unto those that guarded the Amrita, saying, a bird endued with great strength and energy has set his heart on taking away the Amrita. I warn you beforehand so that he may not succeed in taking it away by force. Brihaspati has told me that his strength is immeasurable, and the gods hearing of it were amazed and took precautions. And they stood surrounding the Amritu, and Indra also of great prowess, the wielder of the thunder, stood with them. And the gods wore curious breastplates of gold, of great value, and set with gems, and bright leathern armor of great toughness. And the mighty deities wielded various sharp-edged weapons of terrible shapes, countless in number, emitting, even all of them, sparks of 6 with smoke. And they were also armed with many a discus and iron make furnished with spikes, and trident, and battle-axe, and various kinds of sharp-pointed missiles and polished swords and misses of terrible form, all befitting their respective bodies. And decked with celestial ornaments and resplendent with those bright arms, the gods waited there, their fears allayed. And the gods, of incomparable strength, energy, and splendor, resolved to protect the Amrita. Capable of splitting the towns of the Asuras, all displayed themselves in forms resplendent as the fire. And in consequence of the gods standing there, that would be battlefield, owing to hundreds of thousands of misses furnished with iron spikes, shone like another firmament illumined by the rays of the sun. So ends the 30th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, section 31, Astika Parva continued. Soinka said, O son of Asutha, what was Indra's fault? What? His act of carelessness. How was Garuda born in consequence of the ascetic penances of the Valkilyas? Why also Kasyapa a Brahman had the king of birds for a son? Why, too, was he invincible of all creatures and unslayable of all? Why also was that ranger of the skies capable of going into every place at will and of mustering at will any measure of energy? If these are described in the Purana, I should like to hear them. Soti said, what thou askest me is, indeed, the subject of the Purana. O twice-born one, listen as I briefly recite it all. Once upon a time, when the Lord of creation, Kasyapa, was engaged in a sacrifice from desire of offspring, the Rishis, the gods, and the Gandharvas, all gave him help. And Indra was appointed by Kasyapa to bring the sacrificial fuel, and with him those ascetics the Valkilyas, and all the other deities. And the Lord Indra, taking up according to his own strength, a weight that was mountain-like, brought it without any fatigue. And he saw on the way some rishis, of bodies of the measure of the thumb, all together carrying one single stalk of a palsa, bhutia, rondosa, leaf. And those rishis were, from want of food, very lean-fleshed, almost merged in their own bodies. And they were so weak that they were much afflicted when sunk in the water that collected in an indentation on the road produced by the hoof of a cow. And Purandara, proud of his strength, beheld them with surprise, and laughing at them in derision soon left them behind, insulting them, besides, by passing over their heads. And those rishis being thus insulted were filled with rage and sorrow. And they made preparations for a great sacrifice at which Indra was terrified. Hear, O Soinka, of the wish for accomplishment of which thus vow observing wise, and excellent ascetics poured clarified butter of the sacrificial fire with loudly uttered mantras. There shall be another Indra of all gods, capable of going everywhere at will, and of mustering at will any measure of energy, and striking fear into the present king of the gods. By the fruit of our ascetic penance, let one arise, fleet as the mind, and fierce withal. And the Lord of the Celestials of 100 sacrifices, having come to know of this, became very much alarmed and sought the protection of the vow-observing Kasyapa. And the Prajapati Kasyapa, hearing everything from Indra, went to the Valkylias and asked them if their sacrifice had been successful. And those truth-speaking rishis replied to him, saying, "Let it be as thou sayest." And the Prajapati Kasyapa, pacifying them, spake unto them as follows, by the word of Brahman, "This one, Indra, hath been made the lord of the three worlds. Ye ascetics, ye also are striving to create another Indra. Ye excellent ones, it behoveth you not to falsify the word of Brahman. Let not also this purpose, for accomplishing which ye are striving, be rendered futile. One, let there spring an Indra, lord of winged creatures, endued with excess of strength. Be gracious unto Indra, who is a suppliant before you." And the Valkylias, thus addressed by Kasyapa, after offering reverence to that first of the Munis, viz., the Prajapati Kasyapa, spake unto him. The Valkylias said, "O Prajapati, this sacrifice of us all is for an Indra. Indeed this hath also been meant for a son being born unto thee. Let this task be now left to thee. And in this matter do whatsoever thou sayest to be good and proper." Soti continued, "Meanwhile, moved by the desire of offspring, the good daughter of Daksha, the vow-observing amiable, and fortunate Vinta, her ascetic penances over, having purified herself with a bath in that season when connubial companionship might prove fruitful, approached her lord. And Kasyapa spake unto her, "Respected one, the sacrifice commenced by me hath borne fruit. What hath been desired by thee shall come to pass. 2 heroic sons shall be born unto thee, who shall be the lords of the three worlds. By the penances of the Valkylias and by virtue of the desire with which I commenced my sacrifice, those sons shall be of exceedingly good fortune and worshipped in the three worlds." And the illustrious Kasyapa spake unto her again, "Bear thou these auspicious seeds with great care. These two will be lords of all winged creatures. These heroic rangers of the skies will be respected in all the worlds, and capable of assuming any form at will." And the Prajapati, gratified with all that took place, then addressed Indra of 100 sacrifices, saying, "Thou shalt have 2 brothers of great energy and prowess, who shall be to thee even as the helpmates. From them no injury shall result unto thee. Let thy sorrow cease, thou shalt continue as the Lord of all. Let not, however, the utterers of the name of Brahma be ever again slighted by thee. Nor let the very wrathful ones, whose words are even the thunderbolt, be ever again insulted by thee." Indra, thus addressed, went to heaven, his fears dispelled. And Vinta also, her purpose fulfilled, was exceedingly glad. And she gave birth to 2 sons, Aruna and Garuda. And Aruna, of undeveloped body, became the forerunner of the sun. And Garuda was vested with the lordship over the birds. O thou of Bhrigu's race, hearken now to the mighty achievement of Garuda. So ends the 31st section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, section 32, Astika Parva continued. Soti said, "O foremost of Brahmanas, the gods having themselves prepared for battle in that way, Garuda, the king of birds, soon came upon those wise ones. And the gods beholding him of excessive strength began to quake with fear, and strike one another with all their weapons, and amongst those that guarded the Soma was Brahmana, the celestial architect, of measureless might, effulgent as the electric fire, and of great energy. And after a terrific encounter lasting only a moment, managed by the Lord of Birds with his talons, beak, and wings, he lay as dead on the fields. And the Ranger of the skies, darking the worlds with the dust raised by the hurricane of his wings, overwhelmed the celestials with it. And the latter, overwhelmed with that dust, swooned away. And the immortals who guarded the Amrita, blinded by that dust, could no longer see Garuda. Even thus did Garuda agitate the region of the heavens. And even thus he mangled the gods with the wounds inflicted by his wings and beak. Then the god of thousand eyes commanded Vayu, the god of wind, saying, "Dispel thou this shower of dust soon. O Manruta, this is, indeed, thy task." Then the mighty Vayu soon drove away that dust. And when the darkness had disappeared, the celestials attacked Garuda. And as he of great might was attacked by the gods, he began to roar aloud, like the great cloud that appeareth in the sky at the end of the yuga, frightening every creature. And that king of birds, of great energy, that slayer of hostile heroes, then rose on his wings. Seeing him, saying in the skies over their heads all the wise ones, the celestials, with Indra amongst them armed with double-edged broadswords, iron maces furnished with sharp spikes, pointed lances, maces, bright arrows, and many a discus of the form of the sun. And the king of birds attacked them on all sides with showers of various weapons, and fought exceedingly hard without wavering for a moment. And the son of winter, of great prowess blazing in the sky, attacked the gods on all sides with his wings and breast. And blood began to flow copiously from the bodies of the gods mangled by the talons and the beak of Garuda. Overcome by the Lord of Birds, the Sadhyas with the Gandharvas fled eastwards, the Vasis with the Rudras towards the south, the Adityas towards the west, and the twin Aswins towards the north. Gifted with great energy, they retreated fighting, looking back every moment on their enemy. And Garuda had encounters with the Yakshas Asvakranda of great courage, Rainuka, the bold Kratnaka, Tapna, Uluka, Swasnaka, Nimesha, Praruja, and Pulina. And the son of Vinta mangled them with his wings, talons, and beak, like Shiva himself, that chastiser of enemies, and the holder of Pinaka in rage at the end of the Yuga. And those Yakshas of great might and courage, mangled all over by that Ranger of the skies, looked like masses of black clouds dropping thick showers of blood. And Garuda, depriving them of life, then went to where the Amrita was. And he saw that it was surrounded on all sides by fire. And the terrible flames of that fire covered the entire sky. And moved by violent winds, they seemed bent on burning the sun himself. The illustrious Garuda then assumed 90 times 90 mouths, and quickly drinking the waters of many rivers with those mouths, and returning with great speed, that chastiser of enemies, having wings for his vehicle, extinguished that fire with that water. And extinguishing that fire, he assumed a very small form, desirous of entering into, where the Soma was. So ends the 32nd section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, section 33, Astika Parva continued. Soti said, and that bird, assuming a golden body bright as the rays of the sun, entered with great force the region where the Soma was, like a torrent entering the ocean. And he saw, placed near the Soma, a wheel of steel keen-edged, and sharp as the razor, revolving incessantly. And that fierce instrument, of the splendor of the blazing sun and of terrible form, had been devised by the gods for cutting into pieces all robbers of the Soma. Garuda, seeing a passage through it, stopped there for a moment. Diminishing his body, in an instant he passed through the spokes of that wheel. Within the line of the wheel, he beheld, stationed there for guarding the Soma, two great snakes of the effulgence of blazing fire, with tongues bright as the lightning flash, of great energy, with mouth emitting fire, with blazing eyes, containing poison, very terrible, always in anger, and of great activity. Their eyes were ceaselessly inflamed with rage and were also winkless. He who may be seen by even one of the two would instantly be reduced to ashes. The bird of fair feathers suddenly covered their eyes with dust. And unseen by them he attacked them from all sides. And the son of winter, that ranger of the skies, attacking their bodies, mangled them into pieces. He then approached the Soma without loss of time. Then the mighty son of winter, taking up the Amrita from the place where it was kept, rose on his wings with great speed, breaking into pieces the machine that had surrounded it. And the bird soon came out, taking the Amrita but without drinking it himself. And he then wended on his way without the least fatigue, darkening the splendor of the Sunday. And the son of winter then met Vishnu on his way along the sky. And Narayana was gratified at that act of self-denial on the part of Garuda, and that deity, knowing no deterioration, said unto the ranger of the skies, "O, I am inclined to grant thee a boon." The ranger of the skies thereupon said, "I shall stay above thee if," and he again spake unto Narayana these words, "I shall be immortal and free from disease without drinking Amrita." Vishnu said unto the son of winter, "Be it so." Garuda, receiving those two boons, told Vishnu, "One also shall grant thee a boon, therefore, let the possessor of the 6 attributes ask of me." Vishnu then asked the mighty Garuda to become his carrier. And he made the bird sit on the flagstaff of his car, saying, "Even thus thou shalt stay above me." And the ranger of the skies, of great speed, saying unto Narayana, "Be it so," swiftly wended on his way, mocking the wind with his fleetness. And while that foremost of all rangers of the skies, that first of winged creatures, Garuda, was coursing through the air after robbing the Amrita, Indra hurled at him his thunderbolt. Then Garuda, the lord of birds, struck with thunderbolt, spake laughingly unto Indra engaged in the encounter, in sweet words, saying, "I shall respect the Rishi, the Rishi, of whose bone the Vajra hath been made. I shall also respect the Vajra, and thee also of 1,000 sacrifices. I cast this feather of mine whose end thou shalt not attain. Struck with thy thunder I have not felt the slightest pain." And having said this, the king of birds cast a feather of his. And all creatures became exceedingly glad, beholding that excellent feather of Garuda so cast off by himself. And seeing that the feather was very beautiful, they said, "Let this bird be called Suparna, having fair feathers." And Purandara of 1,000 eyes, witnessing this wonderful incident, thought that bird to be some great being and addressed him thus. And Indra said, "O best of birds, I desire to know the limit of thy great strength. I also desire eternal friendship with thee." So ends the 33rd section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, section 34, Astika Parva continued. Soti continued. Garuda then said, "O Purandara, let there be friendship between thee and me as thou desirest. My strength, know thou, is hard to bear. O thou of 1,000 sacrifices, the good never approve of speaking highly of their own strength, nor do they speak of their own merits. But being made a friend, and asked by thee, O friend, I will answer thee, although self-praise without reason is ever improper I can bear, on a single feather of mine, O Sakra, this earth, with htr mountains and forests and with the waters of the ocean, and with thee also stationed thereon. Know thou, my strength is such that I can bear without fatigue even all the worlds put together, with their mobile and immobile objects. Soti continued, O Soinka, after Garuda of great courage had thus spoken, Indra the chief of gods, the wearer of the celestial crown, bent and ever bent upon the good of the worlds, replied, saying, It is as thou wishest. Everything is possible in thee. Accept now my sincere and hearty friendship. And if thou hast no concern with the Soma, return it to me. Those to whom thou wouldst give it would always oppose us. Garuda answered, There is a certain reason for which the Soma is being carried by me. I shall not give the Soma to anyone for drink. But, O two of 1,000 eyes, after I have placed it down, thou, O Lord of the heavens, canst then, taking it up, instantly bring it away. One, Indra then said, O Ovipious one, I am highly gratified with these words now spoken by thee. I, O best of all rangers of the skies, accept from me any boon that thou desirest. Soti continued, then Garuda, recollecting the sons of Kadru and remembering also the bondage of his mother caused by an act of deception owing to the well-known reason, viz., the curse of Aruna, said, Although I have power over all creatures, yet I shall do your bidding. Let, O Sakra, the mighty snakes become my food. The slayer of the Danvas having said unto him, Be it so, Dollar then went to Han, the god of gods, of great soul, and the lord of yogins. And the latter sanctioned everything that had been said by Garuda. And the illustrious Lord of heaven again said unto Garuda, I shall bring away the Soma when thou placest it down. And having said so, he bade farewell to Garuda. And the bird of fair feathers then went to the presence of his mother with great speed. And Garuda in joy then spake unto all the snakes, Here have I brought thee Amrita. Let me place it on some kusa grass. O ye snakes, sitting here, drink of it after ye have performed your ablutions and religious rites. As said by you, let my mother become, from this day, free, for I have accomplished your bidding. The snakes having said unto Garuda, Be it so, then went to perform their ablutions. Meanwhile, Sakra taking up the Amrita, wended back to heaven. The snakes after performing their ablutions, their daily devotions, and other sacred rites, returned in joy, desirous of drinking the Amrita. They saw that the bed of kusa grass whereon the Amrita had been placed was empty, the Amrita itself having been taken away by a counteract of deception. And they began to lick with their tongues the kusa grass, as the Amrita had been placed thereon. And the tongues of the snakes by that act became divided in twain. And the kusa grass, too, from the contact with Amrita, became sacred thenceforth. Thus did the illustrious Garuda bring Amrita, from the heavens, for the snakes, and thus were the tongues of snakes divided by what Garuda did. Then the bird of fair feathers, very much delighted, enjoyed himself in those woods accompanied by his mother. Of grand achievements, and deeply reverenced by all rangers of the skies, he gratified his mother by devouring the snakes. That man who would listen to this story, or read it out to an assembly of good Brahmanas, must surely go to heaven, acquiring great merit from the recitation of the feats of Garuda. And so ends the 34th section in the Astika Parva of the Adiparva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adiparva, section 35, Astika Parva continued. Soinka said, O son of Asutha, thou hast told us the reason why the snakes were cursed by their mother, and why Vinta also was cursed by her son. Thou hast also told us about the bestowal of boons, by their husband, on Kadru and Vinta. Thou hast likewise told us the names of Vinta's sons, but thou hast not yet recited to us the names of the snakes. We are anxious to hear the names of the principal ones. Soti said, O thou whose wealth is asceticism, from fear of being lengthy, I shall not mention the names of all the snakes. But I will recite the names of the chief ones. Listen to me. Sesha was born first, and then Vasuki. Then were born, Airavata, Takshaka, Kakotka Dhananjaya, Kalakeya, the serpent Mani, Purnaimjaka, and Ailpatra, Vaman, Nila, Anila, Kalmasha, Savala, Ayak, Ugra, Kalsepotka, Suramukha, Dadhimukha, Vimanlapindaka, Apta, Karotka, Sankha, Valisikai Nishthanka, Hemaguha, Nahusha, Pingala, Vahyakarna Hastipta, Mugapindaka. Kamvala, Ashvatara, Kaliyika, Vritta, Samvartaka, Padma, Mahapadma, Sankomukha, Kushmandaka, Tremka, Pindaka, Karavira, Pushpadanstraka, Vilvaka, Vilvapandara, Mashikada, Sankasiras, Purnavadra, Haridraka, Aparajitha, Jyotika, Shriva, Kovya, Dhritarashtra, Sankapind, Virajas, Suvau, Salipind, Prabhakra, Hastipind, Pitaka, Sumuksha, Goinpashana Kutra, Kunjara, Kumuda, Kumulaksha, Titrihalika, Kadama, Vahumulaka, Kakara, Akakara, Kundodra, and Mahodra. Thus, O best of regenerate ones, have I said the names of the principal serpents. From fear of being tedious I do not give names of the rest. O thou whose wealth is asceticism, the sons of these snakes, with their grandsons, are innumerable. Reflecting upon this, I shall not name them to thee, O best of ascetics. In this world the number of snakes baffles calculation, there being many thousands and millions of them. So ends the 35th section in the Astika Parva of the Adiparva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adiparva, section 36, Astika Parva continued. Soinka said, Mo child, thou hast named many of the serpents gifted with great energy and incapable of being easily overcome. What did they do after hearing of that curse? Soti said, the illustrious Sesha amongst them, of great renown, leaving his mother practiced hard penances, living upon air and rigidly observing his vows. He practiced these ascetic devotions, repairing to Gandhamdana, Vedri, Gokarna, the woods of Pushkara, and the foot of Himamvat. And he passed his days in those sacred regions, some of which were sacred for their water and others for their soil, in the rigid observance of his vows, with singleness of aim, and his passions under complete control. And the grandsire of all Brahma saw that ascetic with knotted hair, clad in rags, and his flesh, skin, and sinews dried up owing to the hard penances he was practicing. And the grandsire addressing him, with that penance practicing one of great fortitude, said, What is that thou doest, O Sesha? Let the welfare of the creatures of the worlds also engage thy thoughts. O sinless one, thou art afflicting all creatures by thy hard penances. O Sesha, tell me the desire implanted in thy breast. And Sesha replied, My uterine brothers are all of wicked hearts. I do not desire to live amongst them. Let this be sanctioned by thee. Like enemies they are always jealous of one another. I am, therefore, engaged in ascetic devotions. I will not see them even. They never show any kindness for Vinta and her son. Indeed, Vinta's son, capable of ranging through the skies, is another brother of ours. They always envy him. And he, too, is much stronger owing to the bestowal of that boon by our father, the high-souled Kasyapa. For these, I am engaged in ascetic penances, and I will cast off this body of mine, so that I may avoid companionship with them, even in another state of life. Unto Sesha, who had said so, the grandsire said, O Sesha, I know the behavior of all thy brothers and their great danger owing to their offense against their mother. But, O snake, a remedy for this hath been provided by me even beforehand. It behoveth thee not to grieve for thy brothers. O Sesha, ask of me the boon thou desirest. I have been highly gratified with thee, and I will grant thee today a boon. O best of snakes, it is fortunate that thy heart hath been set on virtue. Let thy heart be more and more firmly set on virtue. Then Sesha replied, O divine grandsire, this is the boon desired by me, viz., that my heart may always delight in virtue and in blessed ascetic penances, O Lord of all. Brahman said, O Sesha, I am exceedingly gratified with this thy self-denial and love of peace. But, at my command, let this act be done by thee for the good of my creatures. Bear thou, O Sesha, properly and well this earth so unsteady with her mountains and forests, her seas and towns and retreats, so that she may be steady. Sesha said, O divine Lord of all creatures, O granter of boons, O Lord of the earth, Lord of every created thing, Lord of the universe, I will, even as thou sayest, hold the earth steady. Therefore, O Lord of all creatures, place her on my head. I, Brahman said, O best of snakes, go underneath the earth. She will herself give thee a crevice to pass through. And, O Sesha, by holding the earth, thou shalt certainly do what is prized by me very greatly. Soti continued, Then the elder brother of the king of the snakes, entering a hole, passed through the other side of the earth, and holding her, supported with his head that goddess with her belt of seas passing all round. Brahman said, O Sesha, O best of snakes, thou art the god Dharm, because alone, with thy huge body, thou supportest the earth with everything on her, even as I myself, or Valvit, Indra, can. Soti continued. The snake, Sesha, the Lord Ananta, of great prowess, lives underneath the earth, alone supporting the world at the command of Brahman. And the illustrious grandsire, the best of the immortals, then gave unto Ananta the bird of fair feathers, viz., the son of Vinta, for Ananta's help. So ends the 36th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. The Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, section 37, Astika Parva continued. Soti said, that best of snakes, Tit, Vasuki, hearing the curse of his mother, reflected how to render it abortive. He held a consultation with all his brothers, Airavata and others, intent upon doing what they deemed best for themselves. And Vasuki said, O ye sinless ones, the object of this curse is known to you. One, it behoveth us to strive to neutralize it. Remedies certainly exist for all curses, but no remedy can avail those cursed by their mother. Hearing that this curse hath been uttered in the presence of the immutable, the infinite, and the true one, my heart trembleth. Surely, our annihilation hath come, otherwise why should not the immutable Lord prevent our mother while uttering the curse? Therefore, let us consult today how we may secure the safety of the snakes. Let us not waste time. All of you are wise and discerning. We will consult together and find out the means of deliverance as did the gods of yore to regain lost Agni, who had concealed himself within a cave, so that the Janamejya's sacrifice for the destruction of the snakes may not take place, and so that we may not meet with destruction. Soti continued, thus addressed all the offspring of Kadru assembled together, and, wise in councils, submitted their opinions to one another. One party of the serpents said, we should assume the guise of superior Brahmanas, and beseech Janamejya, saying, this, intended, sacrifice of yours, ought not to take place. Other snakes, thinking themselves wise, said, we should all become his favorite counselors. He will then certainly ask for our advice in all projects. And we will then give him such advice that the sacrifice may be obstructed. The king, the foremost of wise men, thinking us of sterling worth, will certainly ask us about his sacrifice. We will say, it must not be one, and pointing to many serious evils in this and the next worlds, will reasons and causes, we will take care that the sacrifice may not take place. Or, let one of the snakes, approaching, bite the persons who, intending the monarch's good, and well acquainted with the rites of the snake sacrifice, may be appointed as the sacrificial priest, so that he will die. The sacrificial priest dying, the sacrifice will not be completed. We will also bite all those who, acquainted with the rites of the snake sacrifice, may be appointed Ritvijas of the sacrifice, and by that means attain our object. Other snakes, more virtuous and kind, said, oh, this counsel of yours is evil. It is not meet to kill Brahmanas. In danger, that remedy is proper which is blessed on the practices of the righteous. Unrighteousness finally destroyeth the world. Other serpents said, we will extinguish the blazing sacrificial fire by ourselves becoming clouds luminous with lightning and pouring down showers. Other snakes, the best of their kind, proposed, going by night, let us steal away the vessel of Somaju's eye that will disturb the rite. Or, at that sacrifice, let the snakes, by hundreds and thousands, bite the people, and spread terror around. Or, let the serpents defile the pure food with their food-defiling urine and dung. One, others said, let us become the king's Ritvijas, and obstruct his sacrifice by saying at the outset, give us the sacrificial fee. He, the king, being placed in our power, will do whatever we like. If others there said, when the king will sport in the waters, we will carry him to our home and bind him, so that that sacrifice will not take place. Other serpents who conceived themselves wise, said, approaching the king, let us bite him, so that our object will be accomplished. By his death the root of all evil will be torn up. This is the final deliberation of us all, O thou who hearest with thy eyes. Then, do that speedily what thou deemest proper. Having said this, they looked intently at Vasuki, that best of snakes. And Vasuki also, after reflecting, answered the snakes, saying, Ye snakes, this final determination of you all doth not seem worthy of adoption. The advice of you all is not to my liking. What shall I say which would be for your good? I think the grace of the illustrious Kasyapa, our father, can alone do us good. Ye snakes, my heart doth not know which of all Your suggestions is to be adopted for the welfare of my race as also of mine. That must be done by me, which would be to your will. One, it is this that makes me so anxious, for the credit or the discredit of the measure is mine alone. So ends the 37th section in the Astika Parva of the Adi Parva. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.